Welcome to another episode of the comprehensive Primavera tutorials in which we focus on different aspects of planning and controlling your project through the Primavera software. The other part of each project, after defining the tasks and their predecessors, is related to the resources. Now it's time to define our available resources in Primavera. Therefore, in this part of our tutorial, we will explore how to import various information about our resources into this software, which can be related to the cost of resources and also other detailed information such as resource calendars. In our project, we have 5 different resources from A to E, 4 of which are human resources, and the resource B is a material for our project. There are some details in terms of the availability, for example, for resource C, and of course in terms of the calendar for resource D and E, which means we have resource D only on Tuesday. However, we have resource E on Tuesday and Wednesday. And of course, for resource C, the availability will change by the specific time. In terms of cost, we have standard cost for resource A and the overrate factor, which means the cost would change if we need in the overtime in our project. And for resource B, which is the material and it is the kilogram, we will have the 10% growth in terms of the cost. And the same thing, for example, for the resource E, we have in terms of the growth in the cost. We want to see how we can handle all these data in our project in terms of our resources and how we can enter them in the Primavera software. After defining each resources, since different tasks need different resources, we need to allocate these resources to our task. For example, as you can see, for some resources, the unit of them have been provided. However, for some of them, the total work. For resource B, since it is the material resource type, the number which we see, for example, the 40, it's related to the entire of our project. However, for the human resources, such as resource A, when we see the 10 units, it means that in each day we need 10 units. For example, if we want to calculate its work, we have to multiply the 10 to the duration of the task E1 and to the 8 hours of the day. We want to see how we can allocate these resources to the task. So the first step with defining each resources and the different information which we need in our project, and the next step would be the resource assignment to the task in the Primavera software. It's time to define resources, and then in the next step we will assign each resources to associated activities. In order to go to the resources tab, we have to come in the enterprise from the menu bar, and then here we can click on resources. By clicking on resources, this is the view that you have for defining your resources, and as you know, similar to other parts of the Primavera, the bottom of this page is related to each resource detail, which we are going to talk about. As you know, we had 5 different resources, one of which was material resources and 4 others were human resources. In order to add each resources, like other views, here there is a positive sign which we can add different resources. Since we have 5 resources, I click on this add icon 5 times. This is for the second one, this is for the third, the fourth, and the fifth. By this action, as you can see, I have 5 different resources in my project. If you click on resources and there was a relationship between resources. By using these icons, you can change the dependency. Keep in mind, because all five resources are independent, now we do not consider any relationship between them. In the next step, we have to clear their name. The first one was the resource A, the second one resource B, then it was resource C, similarly resource D, then resource D, and finally resource E. Now it's time to set their resource type. As I told you, the first resource was related to human resource, so we do not change it from labor. However, the second one was related to the material. I change it to material, and the three other resources were human resource as resource A. Therefore, I do not change it. In the next step, I have to clear the unit of measure. As you can see here, by clicking on unit of measure for the material, now you cannot see any special unit of measure because we haven't yet defined any specific measures for our materials. And first, we have to define our unit of measure and then come here and again assign to the second resources. In order to define different unit of measures, we have to go to the admin tabs, and here, as you can see, we have admin categories. I click on admin categories and this window would be appeared for you. We will work with these windows in other videos too, therefore keep in mind different types that we have. Now we want to work with the unit of measure category. As you can see, now we do not have any unit of measures. Therefore, here I want to define a new one. I click on add, and as the abbreviation, I choose the kg for the abbreviation, actually for kilogram. For example, the kg with the small letters. And then by defining that, I click on close. And after that, in the next part, I come here and then click on unit of measure. And as you can see, because I have defined the kg as the unit of measure, I can click on that. And by clicking on that, as you can see, now the unit of measure for this resource is defined. For the primary role, we do not want to work with this icon. I will explain it in other parts. And in terms of the defined default units, since we have considered each day as the 8 hours working, now we have these default units for all 5 resources. So up to now, just we have defined our 5 resources. Let's start with resource A. For resource A, as you can see, this tab is related to the details of our resource. We have the general information about the resource A. For example, here you can enter different things in terms of the employee ID or extra information in terms of the email address. As you can see here, we have the icon in which is related to the active status of the resources. If in the exceptional circumstance in your project, one resources is stopped and you do not have any access to that, you can change the status of this resource to actually in the inactive term by checking this icon out in order to alarm the activities that we do not have these resources currently. However, in the usual condition, we put it on the active form. Then another important tab which we now want to work on it's related to the units and prices. As you can see here, there are three important columns in the units and price tab. The first one is related to the effective date. Since our project has been started from the October 22nd, we have to change it and actually put it on the starting date of our project, which would be this day. And then in terms of the max units, for resource A, we do not have any limitation in terms of the maximum of our resources. Therefore, we put it the 8 hours per day, which is the predefined working hours for our project. However, after planning, if we see we need more than this capacity, we will change the max units. So now we do not change it and we put it on the minimum possibility that we can have for these resources. In the next step, we have the price per unit for our resources. For resource A, there are two different costs, one of which is related to the standard cost and the other one it's related to the overhead. Here, just we can enter the standard cost of that special resource, which in this case is 100. Therefore, I click on 100. As you can see, this would be the price. So the question here is that how can we set up the overhead cost for each resources? For entering the data about the overhead cost, we have to come in the detail tab. In the detail tab, we have the option in which it is related to the overtime. Here we have to click on overtime allowed and enter the overtime factor. As you can see, in our project, the overtime factor for the resource A was 2, which it means we have the twice of the standard cost for the overtime factor, which would be 2000. On the contrary to the MSP, which we enter the exactly overrate cost, here just we can enter the overtime factor. If you do not have the overtime factor in your project, you can easily calculate by the cost of a standard to the actually overtime in order to have this part. So now we have entered the data about the resource A. Let's go through the resource B. For resource B, we click on resource B, and here, as you can see, now we are in the resource B, and then we come to the units and price. For resource B, we have to first change this effective date based on the starting date of our project, which would be the 2nd day of October. And then in terms of the price, since it was 1000, I write 1000 for the price unit. As you know, for the material, we do not have anything for the overtime allowed. Therefore, it's not necessary to change the overtime allowed, because this is the material type of our resource, and the overtime factor has not been defined for that. However, for resource B, as you can see, there is exception in terms of the price of this material, and it has been stated we will have the 10% growth after the 10th day of November. Therefore, here we have to add another effective day by clicking on add. As you can see, now this is the second effective day. I will change this effective day to the 22nd November, and it is stated after the 10th, so therefore by the 11th the price would change, and that would be 10%, which would be in this case 1,100. Therefore, now we have changed the price by changing this effective date. And the next, now it's time to enter the data about resource C. Here, first, we change the date to the starting date of our project, which was the 2nd of November. Then, in the next step, it was stated that this would be 2000, and then in terms of the overrate, we have to come here and allowed and enter the overtime factor. As you can see, there is a point about resource C. It is stated that the availability of this resource would be under change by the 8th day of the November. Therefore, we have to consider this point in terms of the max units and time. In our project, it is stated that by the 8th, actually before the 8th day of the 22nd, we have 10 from this resource. However, after the actually 8th day of November, we will have 12. Therefore, I have to here add another effective day, which this effective day would be the 8th of the November. It is stated that before 8th November we have the 10 for this resource. Therefore, I have to here enter the 80, and after that we will have actually 96, which is the multiplication of the 8 hours to 12 of this resource. And by this effective day, I can handle this issue in my project. So this was about the resource C. Let's go through the resource D. For resource D, I click on that. Then here I have to change to the starting date of my project, which was the October, the 2nd day of October. And as you can see, it was stated that the standard rate, it was 250, and in terms of the overtime factor, we have the 2, which means twice the standard cost in this project. And we do not have to check the other things because in terms of the max units, nothing has been stated, and we do not have any effective date. So let's go to the last resource. For the last resource, again, I have to follow the similar steps, which was changing the date to the starting date of my project, which was the 2nd of October. In terms of the price and unit, it was 200, and for the over time, I have the over factor of 2, and of course there is 1 point. It is stated that we have the 5% growth after the 16th of November. Therefore, I have to add another effective date, and here I have to change it to the November and to the actually it is stated 5% growth after the 16th, which would be, for example, the 7th of the November. Before that we have the 200. However, after that it would be 210. So by this way, in handling the effective date, you can handle both availability of resources if it has been going to be changed in the specific date, like the resource C, and of course you can handle the prices of your resources which are impacting by different dates. There is something missing here, and that is nothing than the resource calendars of resource D and resource E. Because it was stated that the resource D it's available only on one day, which was Tuesday. However, the resource E was available in 2 days, which was Tuesday and Wednesday. In other words, for resource D and resource E, we have to define 2 different calendars and then change them. In order to do that, as we explained in the previous sections, you should come to Enterprise tab and here click on the calendars. Now we want to define 2 different calendars for resource D and resource E. For defining 2 calendars, we should come to Enterprise tab and then click on calendars. As you can see, we will have this view. In the previous sections, since we need the global calendars, we defined customized calendar as the global calendars in order to use it in the entire of our project. However, in this level, we want to have the resource calendars. Therefore, I click on resource and then I click on add, and I want to make a copy of the customized calendar. Then I click on customize calendar and I change it to the resource D, and in the next step I want to modify it. It was stated that in the project the resource D is available only on Tuesday. Therefore I click on work week and I put all days to 0 instead of the Tuesdays. And by doing that, I have changed the working time for resource D. As you can see, it has been changed for resource D in our project. However, there is one issue in this time, as you can see. Because in previous sections, we changed the calendar of the customized calendar in these days, the second change has not been implemented. Therefore, we have to ourselves do that manually. In order to do that, I click all days instead of Tuesday, and then I click on non-work, as you can see, and then this would be work. And as you can see, here we have the Tuesday for working. However, because we had holidays during this time in the December 2022, we shouldn't change the 27th of December 2022 to the working day. Therefore, I put it as the non-work. And that's it. This is the exact things which we want. As you can see now in the calendar resource D, we have Tuesday as a working day. However, the other days are considered as the work day. Then I click on OK, and here I click on close. In the next step, I come to the resource D, and here, as you can see, for resource D, in the detail tabs, we have calendars. I come here and I actually put the calendar which I have defined for the resource D. And by clicking on that, as you can see, the calendar for resource D has been changed to resource D. We should repeat all these steps for the resource E in order to define its calendar. I change the name to resource E, and then I will modify that. For these calendars, the work week would be Tuesday and Wednesday. Therefore, I put other days as the non-working, and only I consider Tuesday and Wednesday as the working days. I click on OK. As you can see, my calendar has been changed for resource E. However, we have the same problems for this resource in the December 2022, exactly for the same reason that I told you, because we had this global calendar change for the this duration in terms of the holidays and the working hours. The second change would not be considered. Therefore, we have to do it by our own. So I consider other days as non-work, and all the things would be exactly the same thing which I want. These 2 days, keep in mind, are holidays, therefore I do not change it. Then I click on OK, and then close. In the next step, I come to the resource E, and I come here in the detail tabs, and then it's time to change the resource to resource E. So by this approach, you can have your customized calendar not only for your project, but also for different resources that you have in your project. After defining our resources and changing the general setting about each resource in terms of the calendar, in terms of the maximum availability that we have, now it's time to allocate these resources to their activities. To do that, we come to the Activities tab, and this is the exactly familiar tab which we've worked in previous sections. As you can see, for each activities, by clicking on that, we have the special tabs here, which is called Resource, and now we want to work with this tab. We start by Task E1. I click on Task E1, and then I click on Add Resources. Since we have 3 resources, A, B, and C, I click on them. Here I add my 3 resources, and now it's time to change the budgeted units, which is related to the planned of our project in terms of the resources for each activities. For resource A, we need 10 units actually in each day. Therefore, since we have the duration of 12 days, and in each days we have the 8 hours, and then we need the 10 of resource A, we will enter 960. However, for resource B, since it is the material type, we need 40 kilogram for the entire project, and then for the resource C, that would be the total work, because It is stated as the entire needing which we will have for resource C in the task E1. Therefore, just I enter the 500. So that's it. Let's go to the task E2. For task E2, we have two resources which are A and then C. For resource A, we have 10. Since the duration it's actually 10 days and we need the 10 units and each day would be 8 hours, we will have the 800. And for resource C, actually the total work has been stated. For resource C, the total work which was 400 has been stated. So that's it. For the resource A, the 800, and for resource C, it was actually the 400. So for the next activity, let's go to the E3. For E3, again, we have two resources. These two resources are A and B, as you can see. For the resource B, we have 50 kilogram. However, for resource A, since the duration it's 8 hours and we need 10 units and each day is 8 hours, we will have the 640. Therefore, here I write 640. Let's go through the task E4. I add B, C, and E. For the resource B, since it is the material, just I write the 20 kilogram. For a resource C, since we need 20 units and the duration of task E4 is 6 days and each day is 8 hours, it would be 960. And again, for the resource, actually this I made a mistake. This was for resource E. Sorry, this was for resource E. For resource C, we have the 500 because it is stated as the whole. So let me sum up. The resource B, it would be the 20 kilograms, which is right. For resource C, it would be 500. And finally, for resource E, that's right. Let's go to the task E5. For task E5, again, I need 3 resources, which are C, D, and E. For the all these 3 resources are the labors. So for resource C, I have the total, which is 400. However, for resource D and E, I have to calculate. So E5 is, it has the 10 days for duration, and each day would be 8 hours. And finally, for resource D, which is the 40, it would be 3,200. And then for resource E, again I have to calculate. I have the 10 days in which I have 8 hours, and finally I have 30 units, which would be 2,040. Let's go to the procurement task step by step. The P1. For P1, we have 2 resources, which are C and which are D. For resource C, we have 200. However, for resource D, I have to calculate. The resource D. P1 it's 40 durations in which we have 8 hours, and finally we have the 60 unit. That would be this number. Let's go to the task P2. For P2 we only have actually the resource E, which is exactly the 400 for resource E. Let's go to the task P3. For P3 I should add resource B and I should add a resource E. For resource B, since it is the material type of resource, I enter the 30. However, for resource E, I should calculate. The task P3, it is 11 days in terms of duration and 8 hours. And in terms, in terms of the, I made a mistake, 11 for duration, 8 hours, and for the resource E, actually we have 40, which would be 3,520. Let's go to the last task of the procurement. For these tasks we have A and we have E. For A we have actually 30 unit, so then 14 and finally 8 hours, which would be this number. And then finally for the last one, since it is the 20, the task would be 40 and it would be the 8, so therefore it would be. That's it for the actually procurement which we had. Let's go to the last main phase of our EPC, which is related to the construction for C1. For C1 I need D and E, both of which are 40. So there are 40. We have 12 duration, and finally we have 8 hours. That would be this number. Both of them are exactly the same because their units which we need are the same. And let's go to the C2. These tasks, we have the A and then C. For C it is clear, we have 300. However, for the A, actually we have the 40, which would multiply to the 10 duration, and finally the 8 hours, which would be this number. And as the last step, we will enter the task C3, in which we have B, C, and D. For B, since it is the material type of our resources, just we need 40 kilogram in all durations, which is 11 days. And for the C we need 400, which is easy. And finally for D, because we have 11 days for duration, in which each day it would be 8 hours, and finally we need 10 from the resource D, it would be this number for resource D. That's it. We easily allocate each resources to each activities. So the first step was defining different resources which we have in terms of different data for the cost, for the calendars, and the next step was assigning the resources to each activities. Of course, there are some more details in terms of the activities and resources in which we will cover them in upcoming videos.